Let's welcome in Lews Whitfield, Senior Vice President of the Create Foundation and a longtime friend of Jack Reed Sr. Lewis, welcome in. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the invitation.
Thank you for joining us to talk with us about a man who made a huge impact on this community. It's kind of hard, I would think, and we've had a lot of people talk about him since his passing on Wednesday, but hard to put into words and capture what he meant to this area, isn't it?
It really is. I started thinking about Jack's life, and really all of us see examples of good leadership in various aspects of life. Some people have strong leadership capabilities with their family or churches. Others are successful business leaders. And then still others make an impact in government, public service, community service. And truthfully, Jack is one of the rare individuals who made an impact really in all those areas, if you think about it. And he did it for almost 7 decades. He was pushing 70 years. He was in the top level of community leadership here since the 50s, but his influence went well beyond Tupelo.
Tell us a little bit about how your relationship developed with him. I know you kind of worked with him in various capacities over a good 40-something years.
Yeah, Jack was always interested in young people. I first met him when I was a senior in high school. I was a very below-average quarterback, and he introduced me to his son, Jack Jr., down on the streets. I didn't even know Mr. Reed knew me. And he told Jack the fact that I was a quarterback, he had me feeling like a pro when I was really below average. But that's the first time I met him. I came back here after growing up here. I came back here in '73 with First Bank, and he was on the board of First Bank, and he became a mentor of mine, and we served together on several community organizations over the last 44 years.
And just seeing up close what he did, you mentioned that he just touched so many areas. What was it that made him so effective in so many ways?
Well, I think it was his interest in people. And I plan to say this at his funeral Saturday, but he was unique in the sense that he could sit on a board and discuss policy, but yet every organization that he served on, he made it a point to visit with people throughout the organization at all levels of the organization. And I think he wasn't snooping. I think he was really trying to see what motivated people, what issues they faced, and I think he was well respected by people at all levels of society. He also had a real affinity for the downtrodden. He, like George McLean, he believed that you built a community by building people up,
right? Not
attacking them, but building them up. And he and George very much worked together to do that, particularly through education, but in other ways as well.
Yeah, George McLean, a former Daily Journal publisher, and the Create Foundation, I want to ask you about his involvement with that, which, of course, is very closely tied to the Daily Journal. People know the history. When George McLean was living, he basically gave the Journal to Create. They're inextricably tied, and Jack Reed was a big part of that. Kind of talk about his early involvement.
Yeah, it's funny. Jack was fond of saying, they asked him what he did in Tupelo. He said, I do 2 things. I defend George McLean, and I raise money for a lot of organizations. But the truth is, George was controversial. He was a strong character, He had strong ideas, and Jack kind of softened the blow. He was sort of a buffer between George and the community in some ways, and they were dear friends.
Yeah.
George really could have sold the Journal for huge sums of money back when.
Yeah.
He turned down, I'm sure, many offers. He wanted the Journal to be owned by the region, but his children weren't coming into the business. He couldn't figure out how to do it. So he and his attorney figured out that a community foundation could eventually own the Journal. So he formed the Create Foundation in '72. Jack and a handful of others were the first board members. And in '83, of course, George died, and after his will was probated, all the stock that he owned in the Journal came to Create.
Right.
And we've enjoyed the relationship and the dividends from that through the years.
We mentioned the different ways Jack Reed Sr. impacted the community. A couple of things I want to hone in on is education and business. First is education. I mean, when I moved here in '02, I was a little bit taken aback by the amount of pride in the public schools here. You don't see that in a lot of communities. I mean, it's the kind of pride that seems rare, especially in Mississippi, a place that struggles in the educational area. But it seems like that's one of his big impacts that still kind of reverberates today even.
He was very much a strong supporter of public education, and his first public recognition, I guess, in that regard was when the schools were being integrated. And he had seen the situation at Ole Miss with James Meredith, and he and others worked to integrate the schools in Tupelo peacefully. Beyond that, he felt like the way up for people, the way to build people up primarily was through education. So he supported education in every way that he could. And then because of his interest in others in education, another generation came along and formed the Association for Excellence in Education. They did another effort to get money from the city, extra money from the city. We got national awards. But all that is built on the foundation of what George and Jack and others thought about public education. And then, of course, at the state level, he was recognized for his leadership as the first State Board of Education, Lay Board of Education chairman, and he had chaired the Blue Ribbon Commission that had led to that recommendation. So of course, he was deeply involved at Vanderbilt. He was on several committees there and headed up the Alumni Association. So he's seen education at all levels. And he was also, I'll mention this, he was the father of the idea of the tuition guarantee program when he served on our commission on the future of Northeast Mississippi. We didn't figure it out for about 15 years, but he was the one who had the idea.
And on the business side, people know about Reed's Department Stores, Reed Manufacturing. Blake Wilson of the Mississippi Economic Council said that he was the conscience, I guess, of the business community, the kind of a consistently forward-thinking person is what he said.
Very progressive, and he was very transparent and open, and he from time to time in a nice way would oppose other business suggestions through the Mississippi Economic Council. But I guess the one time that he really was the conscience of the state is when, after the Meredith situation, a survey showed that a high percentage of people in Mississippi were willing to close the public schools to prevent integration. Yeah. And Jack made a speech down in Jackson. It was an MEC meeting, I think, and many legislators were in there. And as Jack spoke and supported public schools, many of the legislators and other business people got up and left the room. They walked out on him. So he was very courageous at that time. That doesn't seem like a big deal now, but it was a very big deal back then.
Yeah. Lews Whitfield of a Create Foundation. Again, you'll be delivering a eulogy for Mr. Reed on Saturday. Again, his impact has affected other people, and how confident do you feel that his legacy will be carried on by those that he affected, people like you?
Well, I think there's a legacy of community involvement and leadership here. I worry personally, and maybe since I'm 73, I'm talking like an old man here, but I worry about the really younger generation stepping up. Without getting into a lengthy discourse on it, the truth is the greatest generation, which Jack was a part of, the World War II generation, they have been the most deeply involved in community activities. Yeah. Every succeeding generation, this is proved by sociologists at Harvard, has been less involved. And so I worry about that lack of involvement, but I think Tupelo and other areas have leadership programs and other ways to try to stimulate more leadership. But it's really hard to replace somebody like Jack. He was just exceptional.
Mr. Whitfield, appreciate you taking time to talk about your friend, Mr. Reed.
You bet. Thank you for inviting me.